This was 2:30 a.m. this morning. This is the future state of the motion picture industry.
$50-50 by 2020 to get women to get the bigger budgets as well.
It's very important that we put the stories in the hands of the people who own those stories.
Good afternoon, TV lovers. My name is Karina Rotenstein. I'm the TIFF Industry Conference producer, and welcome to the last session, day two here at the TIFF Industry Conference. What day are we? Day two. To begin, we'd like to acknowledge that today's event is taking place on the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community. A few housekeeping notes, just a reminder that there's no professional photography or video recording, but not to worry, we are live streaming this session today, and these talks remain online on our TIFF Talks YouTube channel, so just head on there and share away. And to keep the conversation going, please feel free to use our hashtag TIFF19, and hello to all of our audiences tuning in. So this year marks the 4th year of TIFF's primetime program dedicated to all things television. It's a program which has really integrated television across the festival, including here at the conference, including previous guests Jill Soloway, Angela Robinson, and Larry Wilmore. And today's session, all about directing television, is where we'll talk all about directing television. As directors working in both media, we've gathered an amazing panel of guests here, one veteran director, showrunner Kari Skogland, and 2 directors part of this year's TIFF primetime program, Rachel Perkins and Rebecca Thomas. This session is a Share Her Journey initiative, generously supported by Betty Ann Hagee. We'd like to thank her. So I'd love to introduce our guests. They are incredible. Third over from me is Rachel Perkins, an Arunta filmmaker born in Canberra, Australia. Much of her work depicts stories from First Nations people of Australia. She has directed several feature films, including Radiance, One Night the Moon, Brand New Day, which screened here at TIFF, Jasper Jones, as well as television series Mystery Road, and this year's festival selection, Black Bitch. Welcome, Rachel. To her right and your left is Rebecca Thomas, born in Walnut Creek, California, and holds a Master of Arts in Film at Columbia from University. Her debut feature, Electric Children, in 2012 won a Fapresci Award. She went on to direct episodes of the television series Stranger Things, Everything's Gonna Be Okay, and primetime selection, Limetown. Please welcome Rebecca. And to the far left is Kari Skogland. She's an Emmy-nominated BAFTA award-winning director, showrunner, and CEO of Mad Rabbit. Some of her hit series include The Handmaid's Tale, The Loudest Voice, and the upcoming miniseries The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. We weren't messing around. Kari's been recognized as the Hollywood Reporter's 10 Directors to Watch and was featured in Variety's 2018 Women's Impact Report. Please welcome Kari. And to the very far right, but absolutely not least, as he's going to be guiding this wonderful conversation, is Jeff McNaughton. He is the new director of TIFF Industry and the lead programmer of TIFF's primetime program. So welcome, Jeff. Well, he's already here. Let's get this conversation going. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karina. I was hoping we could start off with hopefully an easy question. What first drew you to serialized storytelling?
Should we go from that side?
Sure.
Well, I came out of features. We were talking backstage. I came out of features. And in fact, I had a wonderful gala here at the Toronto Film Festival a few years ago. But you know, I never made any money on features. And so in order to survive, I started tipping a toe into television and always kind of worked you know, in both worlds. So I never really defined a difference between the two, I would say, other than one you get a paycheck and the other one you don't.
Similar story for me. Yeah, I thought after making Electric Children I would make studio films, and so I worked really hard to get these studio projects, and I did land one after another, but I would work on them for a year and they would fall apart, and then I thought, I think I need to make an income. So I decided to, you know, compact the screen a little bit and downsized, but it turned out to be much better in both ways, because you can actually get something made.
And I suppose my journey was a little bit different because I'm an Aboriginal person. I'm from the Aranda and Kalkadoon First Nations people of Australia. And so our sort of, I suppose it's like CBC here, our ABC or the BBC had a program where they wanted to bring Indigenous people into television drama. So I made my first television drama probably about 6 years ago. I'd made about 4 features and documentary, but I'd never done television drama. And I was a bit scared of it, actually. I was a bit worried about the pace of it because I'd heard it was very fast compared to features. Because, you know, on features you're shooting like 3 minutes a day or 2 minutes a day, sometimes a bit more. But on television, you know, your ratio goes up higher. So I did that and I loved it. And then my producing partner, Darren Dale, who's in the audience, there was a project coming up which was 6 1-hours. And I thought, oh, God, I just don't know if I could do that. You know, I've only done this one thing of television. I love that. He said, no, you can do it. You know, you can do it. I think basically he wanted to pimp me out, really, so that I could come back and make some longer stuff with him. So I did. I went off and did this 6 1-hour project, and I really fell in love with television because for other reasons that we'll probably discuss. So, yeah, sort of a roundabout way to come into it.
I wonder, as fans of serialized storytelling, was there a series or even specifically an episode that really changed your mind in terms of what television could do?
Look, I think we've seen so much great television in the last few years, haven't we? It's just blossomed. And, you know, some of the most exciting filmmaking is happening in television. So, and I think, you know, HBO moving into this, you know, putting money in development, bigger budgets, just made it a much more exciting. Because that's the thing, I mean, I think it's just lack of effort that people have been putting into, I mean, not lack of effort, lack of investment, lack of craft that's made television not so strong as features, you know, because you spend years developing a feature script and lots of money into feature. And now when you get lots of money into the development process, putting the writers in charge a lot more, bigger budgets, you're seeing more exciting television. So it wasn't, for me, one show. It was just this emergence of great ideas, great shows. I'd love to do that. But I think for me, the thing about television is that it's also the engagement with the audience. You know, you get this extended engagement, and we are storytellers at our heart, and I love the relationship with an audience. And television, you know, they keep coming back when it's, you know, when it works, and back again, and they, you know, they're really engaged with you about the show, and I love that length that you get.
Is that similar for both of you in terms of it wasn't a specific series or maybe even an episode that you saw that shift?
For me personally, like TV was a third parent in my house, so it was just, the TV's still always on at my parents' house. So you know, it wasn't hard for me to wrap my head around what I could do in TV because I'd grown up with it. But I think when we all fell in love with Mad Men, I realized that audiences wanted something literary and beautiful, and they wanted still plot, but that you could create something with texture, and you could create this universe that didn't always need to have a typical structure. And that made me feel a little bit better about shirking my feature film obsession and going into the television space.
For me, it was a particular show. Neil Jordan asked me to come and work on a show that he had started called The Borgias. And it was really, I would say, one of the first of the premium entertainment cable shows that was a feature. And so I went over to Budapest, and I don't know if you guys remember the show, but it had Jeremy Irons was the lead actor, played the Pope, and I was just blown away with not only shooting in Europe, but shooting for a budget that was lush and having these amazing sets and amazing actors. And the writing was fantastic because, of course, it was Neil writing. And I realized that was a game changer. So I came back, funny enough, I was living in Canada at the time, and I came back from that show and spoke to a number of producers here and said, world just changed. And it turned out to be correct in more ways than I could have possibly imagined at the time. But that was, I think, the beginning. I went on to work on Boardwalk Empire and all these big, lush, fabulous shows that had amazing actors and amazing sets and just complete features on. And they were all 10-hour features, basically. So that was when I switched and said, actually, I want to stay in this world. And I have stayed so far. I now, though, look at, a feature is really just the short story. And now television, or the premium version of it, is the novel. And I just really don't differentiate between the two.
In terms of getting a series off the ground, we were talking about this a little bit in the back, Kari, but this idea that it differs from specific regions. What might be common in Europe is a little different from the US, and the US a little different from Canada. In terms of each of you working in these different kind of markets, can you talk a little bit about that difference?
Would you like me to?
Sure, if you want to start.
Well, the U.S. is, by definition, I would say, has been anyway, a little bit more corporate because it is associated with big business. So, and you only have so many buyers. That is expanding, of course, and we're getting the streamers who have become prime buyers, and they seem to be more interested in, authored pieces. So I think what's happening, which is fantastic for everyone in the business, is that it's gone from being this model which was super corporate and commercial driven and based on formulaic kind of shows. Even if they were good, they were still a formula, and they were kind of run like a machine. And so as a director, you came in and you obviously tried to put your stamp on it and push the envelope creatively, but truthfully, it's a fairly limited box for you to maneuver in, because it's not your box if you didn't create it, if you're coming in as a hired gun. But now with the streaming shows, they are expecting you to author them. Your role as a director, if you haven't written it, is much more in partnership with the writer. Being a showrunner is changing the meaning because the production side is now taking on the same forms that it has in the past in the feature world, where the director comes in and takes over the production basically and does all the production side of it, as well as influencing the writing. So I'm seeing a shift now in some of the larger projects to the way it was, and in the feature side. So that really engages my creative muscle.
And Rebecca, you with Limetown, you directed all the episodes, is that correct? So what was that experience like, and having that creative freedom throughout a whole show, as much as it was created by the individuals who created the podcast, in terms of episode, like that artistic freedom that you had must have been exciting.
Yeah, it was really lovely. Yeah. I mean, it's everything I've wanted to do on the feature side of things, but now with this amazing material that spanned 5 hours. So we block shot the whole thing too. So day 1, we shot episode 10. On day 50, we shot episode 1. And it was sort of this crazy puzzle that we were putting together, but I got to control it as much as I could. I think with some of the crew, that was, like with the line producer and the UPM, I think that was a new experience for them because they were so used to this model of a director just comes in and you just basically create a scenario where they make you just do simple coverage, and it's not in my vernacular as a director at all. So sometimes for them it would be difficult because I would challenge them. They didn't like that very much. But I wanted to make something a little bit more singular. And the creators wanted me to. So that felt really fabulous, obviously.
And with Blackville Films, so that's your production company. So in terms of getting a series greenlit and going through that process, being on the creative side and then directing specific episodes, what does that look like for you?
Well, again, my experience in television is probably more limited. I've done 2 series now. The current one that's here, which was 6 1-hours, and the previous one, Mystery Road, which was also 6 1-hours. So in that same experience as you had, we were doing, I was doing a lot. And I think that's magnificent because you get to sit across the whole thing. And Deb Peart, who's the editor, my editor of choice, is here in the audience. And you can pick something from that episode and bring it into the other episode. There's no sort of directors fighting over. I hear that happens. That, they don't want the car to blow up in that episode. Can I get the resources for my episode? You're looking at the piece as a one long piece of work, like a feature, but just in parts. So I haven't done the sort of television where you walk on set into someone else has established it. So it's awful. I don't know. I don't think I'd like to do that, actually. I don't think I'd like to do that, but I know that's the way the industry mostly works. But I think that way of moving more to an authored piece, I think that's when you get a solid creative vision across the whole thing. And I think it really works for me and the actors and the script writers because you've just got all the detail of the whole span of the thing in your head. And it's challenging because you're shooting, for say, an episode, I'm not sure, I think I hear that everybody else gets more time than we do in Australia. But on a reasonable budget, you'd get, like 9 days shooting per episode. So if you're doing, you've got 55 days to shoot the whole thing or something. So it's, it's like a 12-week shoot. So it can be long, but it's intensely satisfying creatively. And so all this rubbish about, features is this, television is the less creative or somehow less worthy, I just think is absolute garbage. And I think the audiences, you can see audiences moving to this quality drama and from all around the world. Anyway, but we all know that, don't we? Stating the obvious.
Kari, you used the term hired gun earlier, and I was hoping you could talk a little bit about the difference between, or the relationship between showrunner and director.
Well, it depends. It's really show to show, probably. It can be, because the way, it's actually an old paradigm, because in earlier days, you had multiple directors coming in. You were often doing 23 hours. So an order was not like these 8 and 10. They were 23 and certainly no less than 13. So you needed somebody who, from the writer's room, who understood the whole show, because there needed to be somebody in charge of beginning to end. And directors were coming in just, particularly on formulaic shows, procedurals and stuff, you come in and you do your days and you leave it. You do your director's cut and then you walk away. So on those shows, they're kind of your boss. And which is fine because they know the show, and so you're really coming in to try and fold into their vision and be part of the team. And like I said, bring something to the table. Obviously, some showrunners are more egotistical than others, and so they're harder to work with or not. Some showrunners, by definition, simply hand you the script and you go away and you make it and you come back and just like a feature. So each one has its slightly different nuance. Obviously, I think I personally work better in the scenario where I'm given more freedom. So, and now that this work is, as I said, becoming more authored, that role is changing. You know, Jason Bateman, who's a good friend, we've tried to work together a couple times on Ozark or his new show, and he calls it the feature model in television, which is the writer writes and the director directs, and so it's much more the feature model, where in my purview, which is where my skill set is, I take on the whole production. As a gun for hire, so-called, I'm not, I'm expected. I haven't created the show, so I'm expected to come in and make my episode great, or as good as it possibly can be, which means challenging the writing at where I feel I can help, or it's also very related to budget, so it's wrestling always what's too big into the much smaller box. So you're more, I would say, project manager and crisis management to some degree, and creative. You have to constantly push your creative buttons to make sure that they're being satisfied, and you're not just in there kind of doing a job. But nonetheless, it's discipline, and so as a result, you get kind of good at being fast, making decisions quickly, and doing the 9-day episodes if that's what it is, or the 12-day, because you really have evolved your skill set to be able to know how to get through your day. These are all just really practical things that you have to do as a director, because you can't be a head scratcher.
No. That's a good way of putting it. Everyone's sitting around while you're going, yeah, that's not helpful, is it?
Rebecca, in terms of that kind of that difference between a creative director on a series and having that creative freedom versus coming onto a series and getting to know the cast and really doing that job, what was that experience like on Stranger Things? How much creativity did you have coming into a show that's really established? And I'm sure there's a lot of pressures with a show like that to get it right.
I didn't have too much.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, they came in, the cast was decided, and the script was decided, and the costumes were decided, so yeah, not too much.
Well, when you're in it...
Just turn off those cameras, we'll have a real...
I was about to say, didn't she say she didn't like it before that? No. Not a particular show.
Because those two, because that experience of coming onto a show and as a director to direct what has been given to you, a lot of other people are in that scenario in terms of having to do that, and I wonder, how do you create a rapport with a cast that's gone through multiple seasons or multiple episodes already, or with a crew in that regard? Because I think those are interesting takeaways for our audience who might be in a similar situation.
I mean, I think that's the job of director in any scenario. For instance, on Wednesday, I'll start shooting a feature for a new platform called Quibi, which will be broken down into 10-minute episodes. And we've cast the whole thing, but I will meet them the day before.
Right.
And I'll need to have a good relationship with them. And it's just about being who you are, I think, and being a human being and being kind, and when you need to, being clear and direct and professional. So, in the Stranger Things scenario, I came in and just did that very thing, because there's not a lot of time and there's not a lot of money, and so there's a lot of pragmatism that has to happen when you're the director. Yeah.
You bring up a good point, though. It isn't easy always to fold into an existing production, because sometimes, they're not as trusting, and why would they be? Because they've gone through a number of phases. So if you're walking in, how many people in here are directors, television directors? So we're talking to each other. Well, so then you all know, so you have to come in, I think, with the expectation that you're folding into their show, and you have to trust that they really know their characters, and who are you to do anything but help them. and give them suggestions that they may not have thought of. And I find it really helpful to make sure that we have a relationship outside the set. So I try and find time to meet them, go over the script, and so that we start to build a trusting relationship. Because obviously, if they're better, the show is better, and if we can have fun on set, that's always the goal, to take the tension out. Then that makes for a very different relationship, because they start to let down their guard a little bit and let you into the club.
And I think there's something too, for instance, being dropped into a series, even if it's like, if you're later in the series, like episode 8 or 9, like the crew is super tired. You don't know what they've been through. I mean, you do because you've read the script, but you don't know the hours they've been working. So it's like memorizing everybody's names, making sure, making sure on a macro level, you're taking care of everybody in the editing room, to the actor, to the crew, trying to make sure that sort of care is there while also making something good.
You've all, I think, worn different hats on different projects in a way of whether it's writing, directing, or producing, directing. Is there a favorite part in the process that you have in terms of, do you like wearing your producer hat more than your directing hat, or what part of even the production do you like the most? What is it when it's over?
The rap party. Well, definitely coming to a festival is a really good thing. I don't produce anymore. I made a conscious decision about 10 years ago or more to stop producing, or 15, I can't remember, I'm getting too old. But and so I just focus on directing now. And that's been great, actually, just making that choice and saying, this is what I'm going to do. I love the shooting aspect. It's challenging, though, as you say. You've got to just be on your feet and make decisions and be practical and be putting out fires and thinking about how to use your resources most effectively. But I like that about being on set, because it challenges every aspect. Your personal skills, your financial skills, your time management, your creative thinking, your sense of humor. You're just challenged in so many ways, creatively, aesthetically, pragmatic. But then I must say, I think one of the beautiful parts of filmmaking, whether it be features or television, and really I see them as very similar, is the editing part, because that's actually when it's yourself, usually in a nice room, with one other person who's actually doing most of the work, because they're doing the editing, and you're sitting on a couch, and you've actually been out on set for like 4 months or something, so you're completely drained, and you're just on your own with this person, in the dark, they're doing most of the work, you've got a cup of tea, and it's just entirely creative, because there's no other pressures on you except to try and make, and you're remaking the film again, or the television all over again. It's like the scripting process begins again, but with the limited elements you now have from your shoot, and it's just 100% creative. And once you apply the music and you rework the scenes and bring in different material, it's just wonderful, I think, and I love that part of it. But then I also, that's sort of my favourite part. But then, there's an actor in the audience, Deb Malman, who I've worked with for 20 years, and what I love doing also is shooting, because I get to be with those people that I love, working with, and that's wonderful too. So it's hard to decide, but I think, the editing, right. I think, for me.
Same, I fell in love with this film through editing. Wow. I thought I was going to be maybe a classical pianist, and then in high school I found editing in my radio broadcasting class and would just sit for hours and just put things together, and I loved. It was like working with clay. You could just make it good, or you could make it bad. So for me, all of the struggle and the fun and all of the great stuff is, like you said, Rachel, you get into the editing room and it feels so safe. And this editor's therapizing you as you go through the footage, yes, and are confronted with all the mistakes you made, but then you get to actually make it.
Yeah, we talked about this the other day in terms of the puzzle that was Limetown, and how difficult that puzzle must have been to put together. What was the editing room like on that specific show?
Like I said, it was like World War Z. Because definitely the creators, had made a podcast, and it's much easier to withhold some mystery when you're just hearing things, but when you're actually dealing with visuals, you have to be very careful about what you're revealing. So, you know, there was lots of cooks in the kitchen, and I made sure I was in that editing suite even when I wasn't invited. So, just to make sure, you know, I just wanted to protect this whole entire thing that I had worked so hard for.
Yeah. Kari, favorite part?
Well, I started as an editor.
Okay.
So editing for me was, you know, yeah, a very creative, and I kind of rely on editing. And sometimes I'm a bit cavalier about it. Oh, I'll fix it in post, don't worry. But that is the truth. You will, if you've messed it up a little bit on set, there will be some gem in there that you can find, but it requires sort of a different mindset and going at it differently. So I find that as you said, relaxing. But I think where I really get my juice is from when you're on set and you're working with a scene, and the entire crew we've all been working toward this goal, and we do a great scene together, and the actors are on their stride, and the camera move is, you know, I love to do complicated camera moves just to really upset everybody, and so you know, the camera move is perfect, and the focus is just right at the right time, moving through, and it comes together like a symphony, and there's nothing like that kind of sense of achievement amongst a group of people. I enjoy that.
Yeah, agreed.
Rachel, you mentioned working with Deborah Mailman, who is here often, and I'm sure you've built somewhat of a rapport in a way. And I'm wondering, Kari, in terms of the rapport that you've had to build with some of the actors that you've worked with, or Rebecca as well, these are some big names and some heavy hitters in a way. How has that experience been like when you are pulled into the show, and is there any, I maybe not, but I feel like I would be very intimidated in that situation. How do you as directors kind of break through that and really direct them?
You know, I think it's just being yourself for the most part, and not trying to have an answer when you don't have one. Because, you know, crews will take you out for a road test and just see, you know, what you're made of. In terms of actors, they'll do the same thing every so often. So if I say something stupid, I'll just cop to it and go, you know, okay, all right, so sorry, that was really dumb. But out of conversation, so just enjoying the social side of what it is to do this extraordinary work that we get to do. And I, you know, the more I work with actors who are, you know, very prominent and well known, and have won big awards and are you know, doing work that is extraordinary, the more I realize part of my job is to protect them. And I think people don't realize how much actors are, you know, how many people in this room are in front of the camera. So my kudos to you. It's a hard job. And you expose yourselves in ways that it's really hard for a crew to understand, you know, just what that is, to put yourself out there like that. And so I find some of what my day is just about is what do you need to an actor, what do you need for your performance? Because most people know, I mean, I need to have a coffee before I go in. I need to, whatever it is, I need to have a snooze. I need to, you know, there's many different ways that people come to a scene. And an actor, I find, they've been doing, you know, the solid actors will be really prepped. So they come ready. And if I'm not on my game, meaning I'm still flipping around with lighting and I'm messing around with the camera, and I'm not, that performance is sitting there with them, and they really want to get it out. And if I start on the wrong coverage, so now they're having to, you know, hang on to this, their preparation. So it's really you remembering that we're not just, the whole reason we're there is to point a camera at them. So, and to allow them to shine, you know, their performance back. So it's how best to get to that place. So I'll ask about close-ups sometimes. Some days are different too. Some actors want the close-up first because they know as we go with the multiple takes, it will start to, they'll have to force it a little bit. Others will maybe won't know their lines as well as they want to. So they'll, prefer you to do everybody else in the room because they want to see what everybody else is going to do with the scene, maybe. So, it's really having that collaborative conversation. And it's really practical, too. I mean, if you go at them with pages, with big, long paragraphs, you got to give them a break and let them have time to learn it. And you can't that morning go, okay, and by the way, here's a new page. And expect them to, so you have to, just like you would do the respect with your DP or your editor or whatever, give them the same space to be excellent. And then just by having that attitude alone, the trust back and forth, I think, becomes your asset.
And for you, Rebecca, you mentioned that at the Limetown premiere, you mentioned how incredible Jessica Biel was at kind of getting into character and seeing that. And I guess that must build a certain amount of respect and trust between the both of you to see that you've both brought your game to that said project.
Yeah, we communicated really simply with each other. I would say, this is my plan. What do you think of that? And she would say, yeah, I think, we were always a little bit symbiotic that way, where I would say this, we always made sure we were communicating. And then some days we would come to set and throw out the pages, and she'd say, let's do a sex scene. And I'd be like, well, we're closing down the set today. Jessica wants to do a sex scene. We would do it. And, it was like this interesting relationship with her that was really super creative. But yeah, I think just to echo, I think it's just about being communicative, and any actor, the high level or the low level, just needs some time and some attention, and they're in a really vulnerable spot. So feedback is really good, even if it's hard to give them the feedback, let's try something completely different for this next take. And, or, sometimes I say, I want to try going this direction. If it's really bad, I'll just do, I'll show it to you. You can come back and look at it, depending on the actor, of course. But just being really communicative and understanding that who that person is might be different from the next actor. So just trying to assess those needs, almost like a parent with a child.
I try to give reassurance as well. If it sucks, it won't be in the movie.
Yeah.
So don't worry about it, right?
So good luck.
Right. So we can experiment. We can try something. And we can go, wow, that sucked. That won't be in the movie. Or, wow, we opened a door to another idea that we wouldn't have done otherwise. So I think it's important to not be afraid of trying stuff. And if you come at it with that sort of openness, then, people will respect you for that.
Rachel, we mentioned Deborah earlier. What does it mean to surround yourself with people that you really like working with and are friends? How does that help the collaborative process?
I think it's always great if you can, because all those things about communicating and being together over a long period of time and having respect for each other helps, but I don't think that's absolutely necessary either. But I must say, I was anxious about this panel today, because I was sort of like, oh God, they've done all these big shows, and I don't know, I find it a little bit difficult to talk about directing, because I find it a very practical approach in the way that you're talking about it, communicating, working out what the actor needs, and then creating a space where they can do what they want in the way. Like, should we be shooting the first take? Should we shoot the rehearsal? Do you want to go wide first? Or like Deb, she's a one-take wonder. So I make everybody be absolutely prepared before she gets on set, so that when she gets on, she does her first take, we are totally ready to go. So rehearse the camera move, we know everything's going to happen, and we get it, and we're like, okay, great, next. So, there's a lot of romance around directing, but I think it is those things about looking after the cast, creating a space for them to work in, being really clear about your communication, and so I'm glad that you all said that, because I feel like, oh yeah, that's me too. But yeah, look, I do come back to the same people, because I think they're really talented. And in fact, we were talking about this in the panel that we did yesterday, that often I'm leaning on the actors, for bringing them into the scripting process, getting the meaning, the interpretation out of them. They're adding stuff all the time. So it's a very, at its best, it's a very collaborative experience.
So we're going to do 2 more questions, and then I promise I will throw it to the audience. My next question is, what is the biggest change that you've seen in the industry since you first started that has affected what you do?
And you're looking at me because I'm the oldest one on the panel, and I've probably seen the most change.
I was not. I was going right down the line.
Oh, well, I can answer that. I started, when television had little rabbits in it. No, television was a medium where it was, not only corporate, but you could only get it through certain, it had a cord and it went to a place, and you really, you couldn't, there was no dexterity in the industry. So now with streaming, and we all know this, I'm saying the obvious, I think there's more to come, which I think is really super exciting, because all these streaming services are merely just sophisticated URLs. So there's more coming where I think we can, the Wild West, just like features, we will be able to, have our show out there, and you just go to GameOfThrones.com instead of it being curated at these curated sites. So I think the biggest thing is not only more dexterity in all the different avenues that we can now find entertainment, but what's going to happen as a result of that, because the branding is changing. So HBO as a specific brand is not necessarily, we could only go to HBO. Well, now we can get HBO on 27 different sites, and then we can also get what HBO has on 20, so it's all breaking down, which just means access. So it means diverse content, because worldwide, when you're no longer talking about a country, you're talking, or even a region, you're talking about a world. So as geo-blocking breaks down, I think we're going to find that you can make a very unique show that speaks to what would be a limited audience, and yet find a big number against that, find an audience for it, or they can find you. So that just opens up the creative window, which is big changes.
Yeah, Facebook, we shot Limetown for Facebook Watch, and it's free, and it'll just premiere globally. So anybody can watch it.
It's amazing. And have a conversation about it.
Have a conversation about it. You don't have to buy it. It's just there, and I can see what someone in Italy thinks, or someone in Japan. So I'm pretty excited about that part of it. But I'm shooting a show for Quibi, and Quibi is going. This platform is only meant for the iPhone, and I'm shooting it horizontally, and I'm prepping to shoot it vertically. So I'm really into graphic novels, so I'm actually storyboarding it with all these different panels and trying to figure out the technology of that. And so it's just like a totally different mindset. And after shooting, a series, I'm really excited about the opportunities in VR, in this Quibi format, and in any sort of ways to have an experience or to relay stories differently to audiences.
And for me, I agree, the technology is driving, and the markets are, fragmenting, and free-to-air breaking down, channels are closing. How many? It's like 380 channels have closed last year or something. So that's one big change, and that will really drive change. But also I think that for me, the big thing, particularly in television, is the ideas. Television has just got so much more interesting. When I was growing up, which wasn't that long ago, even though it might look like that. Television was so boring, it was white bread dull, and now, you look at all the great shows that are coming out, and it's just fantastic. You see all these different voices, from so many places. We're watching stuff internationally much more. That's what's exciting for me. I think all the boring conventions that are sort of market-driven preconceptions about what audiences want to watch, who they want to watch, what sort of stories, the formula stuff, that for me is breaking down. And it's great because it's being driven by ideas, and creatives, and that's, for me, the exciting thing about television. That's why I'm really interested in it. Because in some ways, television is less risky than features, because there's a commercial you know, it's a business model, there's an audience there for it, you know, and whereas sometimes with a feature, just like you're shooting an arrow into the air, where will it land? Who knows? What cinemas will it get into? Who knows? Who's going to watch this? So much competition, hard to make money. You know, television feels like it's connecting with audiences, and the innovation is through ideas, and that's what's driving it.
Well, I'm going to throw it to the audience to ask some questions. So we have microphones on either side, so they're going to pass around a mic. So this gentleman has the mic here, if you want me standing up.
Yeah, is this on? Yeah. I just had a question about when you're coming on a show that has already had directors precede you, and every show has its own mise-en-scène and you have your own style. How do you balance your own style with the style that's already been established within the show? And has a showrunner ever said, "Nah, don't really do that on this program"? Like, how do you balance that?
Okay, I'll take that one if you like, because I've done that a fair bit. First of all, you don't take a job, given that's a job, right? You're coming into it. You don't take it if you don't like the show. So you have to. Now, having said that, in my early days, I certainly took a lot of jobs that I didn't like the show because I had to work. So I was just so thankful that somebody wanted me to work for them that I just said, sure, it'd be great. But then I would push the envelope, but I always made sure that the coverage was within the aesthetic of the show, and then I would push. So we had options, and then that's where in the editing suite, of course I would push the envelope, and of course they would look at it and go, Kari, you made a different show. I mean, I don't know, and then they would put it back. But then there was always something in there that they would keep and that they liked, and that would get me the next show because they would say, well, she's kind of creative. So, you know, so you don't go in and try and do a template. You still always try to push, but you make sure that you're respecting what they have set up, and you can always rely on the DP to help you with that, and often the AD. You know, you can. I do a lot of homework about that. Make sure you've watched all the shows. You know, when you walk in, so you know the characters in the show and what the look is and what the aesthetic of the performances are, so that you're not offside with any of that. Just, you know, do your homework.
It's a question with the mic. Who has the mic on this side? Yes, please stand up.
Hi. Thank you all for being here. We've talked a lot about working with actors, and then we were also talking about how you're often shooting the end episode on the first day of shooting, and then it's all sort of mixed in. Have you ever encountered a problem when working with actors where you're shooting something from the end of the season and the beginning of the shoot, and the character is in a very, very different place in terms of getting the actor to that place and understanding the story of what got the character to that space when you have the whole season in your head? Is it also something that you will have panned out for all the actors to have in their head as well?
I think there's such a huge amount of preparation that you go through as a director, especially if you're block shooting an entire season of TV. So definitely, in my experience, I've always just communicated with the actors beforehand, and then on set, you know, you have to just be really confident that that ending is the ending you planned out, and all that preparation is, you know, that it's going to eventually lead you there. With my feature film, I shot the climax the first day, so you don't really want to do that, but on a low budget thing, that's just what we had to do. Yeah, and you just have to be very confident and trust yourself.
I think if you're block shooting, though, you have all the scripts by definition. So, so they are already on side with the whole creative. I've been in situations where we didn't have the whole script, and therefore, or the whole 6 hours, and therefore the actor wasn't entirely informed. So you're in the middle ground, and they just don't know where to push, where to land it, you know, and so that's harder on the actors. But, you know, then you do your best guess, and usually it's pretty close.
Can I just add to that the thing that I've found the worst, because we're all talking about how lovely it is, the challenge that I've had in my two shows, and not from any, you know, carelessness on our behalf or anyone's behalf, is scripts not being ready when you're going into pre-production. And that seems to be a thing that's specific to Australia, because I know in the US and maybe Canada you make the pilot first and then everything gets written. But in Australia we don't usually make the pilot. We have a Bible, we've got the first show script and maybe a couple of other scripts, and then maybe just an outline, a paragraph, what happens, and you go into pre-production sometimes and you don't have those scripts. So as director, you're working with the writers, trying to get those scripts, and all the departments are working off these scripts that are changing, and locations are changing, and scenes are getting cut, and you spend a lot of your pre-production time as a director helping the writers get through, and then communicating that to the rest of the departments, and they're like, is this location happening or not, or what are we doing? And that's, I think, the problem in Australia. We haven't quite solved that thing, because the broadcasters say, right, we want it on air right now, and so everyone's like scrambles to get it on air for them. But then there's a lot of pressure on the director and the rest of the team to deliver. And that is something that really doesn't work for the director, I've found.
I'm in that, right? It's not just Australia.
Is it? Okay.
Wednesday, I'm trying to get the writers, I wish I could, I knew I should have, when I signed the contract, I should have just had a polish in my contract, because I have to get the writers to do the things I want. They don't want to do it. They don't understand the practicality of, I only have 15 extras for that day, so I can't make that big party happen that you want to happen, and so. Yeah. But there's always this push and pull between. Yes. Yeah, if I could just get that script.
Yeah, it's a real issue. It's a real issue, I think, for television directors. For such big sweeps of time to be absorbed when when you should be preparing with this other stuff.
Fighting with the.
Very interesting. There's a question on this side. If you have the mic, please stand up on this side.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. It has been an amazing panel. I actually started in editing as well, and recently transitioned into directed Brandon and documentary content. And just wanted to hear your thoughts and advice on if someone wants to break into directing for TV and make that transition, what would your advice be?
I think everyone's path is different. There's a lot of programs that you can, I've mentored a lot of, through both programs and just personal mentorship, which then, it's ultimately all about relationships. So if you're in a situation where you're being hired by a showrunner, the showrunner doesn't have the last say, the network. It's true of features as well. You might, as an auteur, and you're doing all hats, so you're perhaps also financing, in which case they can't really kick you off. But if you're in the television world, there are a lot of people that have to check the box. So you need to present not only some work, so you've got to shoot stuff, shorts, win awards, enter any of your work, even script work. Sometimes I have a friend who stalked a couple of showrunners forever until he had a real body of work, but just could not break into this particular market. And so, but he gained their trust, and eventually someone gave him a project, a show, and it usually is in the middle. So of the 10, they'll give you number 5, because if you screw it up, they can fix it. And then you just make sure you hit it out of the park. But really, it's relationships. So I know the various guilds have lots of programs, DGA, DGC, I'm sure in Europe, not as much, because they're not, they don't have guilds over there, but they have mentorship programs through the different broadcasters. So you find your way into those. So it's not, there's no one route in, and interestingly, there isn't necessarily, there's no degree that you can have. You can get a degree from NYU or something, and that doesn't mean you'll get a job. You're now starting in the same place you would without the degree. So what you can use that for, if you're going to go to various schooling, is an opportunity to have a camera and to make a show, to make some kind of movie that shows your skills.
It's a question over here, so whoever has the mic, please stand up.
Rachel was alluding to norms and conventions before. I wanted to know if there are any widely accepted conventions, norms, processes within the industry that are widely accepted, but you have a contrarian view on, that you don't fully agree with, that you feel comfortable sharing with us here in terms of how that's been embedded within your process now.
I think coming from features and documentaries, for example, as a director, I always felt that I wanted to be across the whole post-production process. And I understand that producers drive television in ways, but I feel as director I have a creative responsibility to my projects, and so it's been suggested that, oh, well, the director doesn't go to the mix because they're often on another job, or they don't go to the grade, and I'm like, no, I'm going to the whole thing. And I like to do a director's pass before the producers come in to the mix and the grade, because that's how I learnt to work on features, and that's what I think my role is. It doesn't stop at the picture cut. In Australia, a lot of the directors leave at picture cut, but God, the sound just brings a whole new thing. So yes, it is a producer's medium, so-called, but I really insist on being involved creatively across the whole thing, and I also insist on being involved in the final stages of the script and the casting. But I mean, that's, I think, specific to the projects I've done where I'm coming in as the only director. I'm not stepping in midway. But I do believe that our role should continue through post-production. And I think that's a norm that isn't widely accepted.
Yeah, I think for me, being able to be a part of choosing the DP, especially if I'm going to author the whole thing, is having a DP chosen for me, and then having to just work with that person and direct that person, even though we have no relationship, or, you know, it maybe feels like they're hired before you, so they want to babysit you a little bit. Like that, that's very irritating to me. And so anything I go work on going forward, I have to have a say in the DP. And I'm with you. Like, I want to be there every step of the way through post. But, you know, I think in terms of actual production and the way things are set up, it's set up pretty well. And it's really efficient if you do it right and block, light, shoot, it works.
So unfortunately, we're all out of time, but I just want to give a big thanks to Kari, to Rebecca, to Rachel. You're very welcome.
Thank you, everyone, so much. Now, please head into the lobby. Go have some drinks, courtesy of Cultural Industries Ontario North. Thank you so much, and we'll see you tomorrow.